The words echoed in the sudden, sharp silence of the grand hall, each one a shard of ice embedding itself in my heart. I, King Kale of the Silver Moon Kingdom, reject you, Elara of the Fallen Rock Pack, as my fated mate. His voice, a low thunder that usually sent shivers of illicit pleasure down my spine, was now flat, devoid of any emotion. He stood on the dais, bathed in the ethereal glow of the twin moons, his silver eyes cold as a winter storm. Before him, the entire court, alphas, betas, and omegas from every allied pack, watched me crumble. My knees hit the polished marble floor, the sound a pathetic crack in the vast, suffocating quiet. He wasn't just rejecting me, he was annihilating me. My wolf howled in agony within me, a wretched, desperate sound only I could hear, clawing at the inside of my ribs as the fragile thread of our nascent bond snapped, burning like a brand of pure agony across my soul. I was nothing. A weak, Omega-born wolf from a forgotten pack, a political offering he had just thrown back in the faces of the elders. He turned away, dismissing my existence with a flick of his powerful wrist, leaving me shattered and exposed under the weight of 1,000 prying eyes. Wait, before the next revelation unfolds, if this mystery has already captivated you, let us know where you're following this story from. To ensure you don't miss unexpected claims, broken bonds, or awakenings under the moon, subscribe and stay close. Now, back to the scene. My gaze blurred with unshed tears, the glittering chandeliers and stoic faces melting into a cruel, indistinct smear of color. Humiliation was a physical entity, a heavy cloak that smothered my breath and crushed my spirit. I could feel the whispers slithering through the crowd, sharp and venomous. An Omega? What did they expect? The king needs a strong Luna, not a stray pup. Each word was a fresh lash on my already flayed spirit. My hands, trembling uncontrollably, pressed against my stomach, a desperate, instinctual gesture to protect the tiny secret I now carried alone. A secret that would die with me in this hall if I didn't find the strength to move. A guard, his face a mask of pity, stepped forward. "My lady, you are to be escorted from the palace grounds." His voice was gentle, but the command was absolute. I was being discarded like trash. Somehow I found my feet. My legs felt like brittle twigs, threatening to snap with each step. I refused to look at Kyle again. The image of his cold, dismissive posture was already seared into my memory, a permanent scar on my soul. As I was led past the silent, judging rows of shifters, my own scent, a pitiful mix of jasmine, rain, and now the putrid stench of rejection, filled my nostrils. I was a walking wound. Once outside the colossal palace doors, the cool night air was a shock to my heated skin. The guards didn't just escort me to the gates, they pushed me through them, the heavy iron bars clanging shut behind me with a sound of chilling finality. I was an exile, cast out, abandoned. I stumbled into the cobbled street, my simple ceremonial gown already feeling like a costume from another life. I had nothing, no pack to return to, no family, no mate. Just the agonizing phantom pain of a bond that was never allowed to form, and the impossible weight of a life growing inside me that the most powerful alpha in the world had just disowned without a second thought. My wolf, my poor broken wolf, whimpered and then fell silent, retreating into the deepest recesses of my being. It was just me now. alone, under the cold, indifferent light of the same moons that had once promised me a king. I wrapped my arms around myself, a poor substitute for the warmth I'd craved, and with a final, tear-filled glance at the gleaming spires of the palace that held my tormentor, I ran. I ran until the city lights faded, until the manicured forests of the royal lands gave way to untamed wilderness, and until my paws, for my wolf had taken over in a desperate bid for survival, were raw and bleeding. I didn't know where I was going. I only knew I had to disappear, for my own sake and for the sake of the child he would never know. The next 5 years were a blur of survival, a patchwork of menial jobs in human towns where the scent of gasoline and fried food masked the faint, lingering trace of my wolf. I called myself Ella now. Ilara and her broken heart were buried deep, under layers of feigned smiles and the quiet resilience of a mother. My son, Liam, was my entire world. He was a spark of light in the endless gray of my existence, a perfect, beautiful fusion of his father and me. He had my softer features, my gentle smile, but his eyes were pure kale, a startling, luminous silver that seemed to see right through to my soul. They were a constant, painful reminder of what I had lost, but also a fierce testament to what I had fought to protect. We lived in a small, cramped apartment above a bakery in a town called Havenwood. The name was ironic. It was no haven, just a place to hide. I worked as a waitress at the local diner, serving coffee and greasy burgers to truckers who never looked twice at the quiet woman with the sad eyes. Every day was the same. Wake up before dawn, get Liam ready for school, work a 10-hour shift, pick him up, make dinner, read him a story, and fall into an exhausted sleep, only to do it all over again. I kept my head down, avoided making friends, and suppressed my wolf until she was a faint, dormant presence I could almost forget. Almost. Sometimes on the full moon, the ache in my chest would become a physical agony, a deep, primal yearning for a mate who had cast me aside. On those nights, I would lock myself in the bathroom, biting down on a towel to stifle my sobs, praying Liam wouldn't hear. He was a happy child, full of laughter and endless questions. But he was starting to ask the hard ones. "Mommy, why don't I have a daddy? Are we different from other people?" I would deflect, offering vague, hollow answers that never quite satisfied his curiosity. He was a shifter, I knew. His senses were sharper, his speed and strength already beyond that of a normal human child. Soon I would have to tell him the truth about what we were and what he was. A prince with no kingdom, the son of a king who didn't want him. The thought terrified me. Meanwhile, in the Silvermoon Kingdom, a shadow was falling. It began subtly, a blight on the crops in the northern farmlands, a strange sickness that weakened the pack warriors. Then it grew, a creeping, gray decay that leached the color from the ancient forests and tainted the water of the sacred rivers. The pack seers spoke of a curse, a withering of the land tied directly to the king. Kale had grown harder in the intervening years. He had taken a powerful alpha female, Selena of the Ironclaw pack, as his chosen consort, but not his mate. The moon goddess had not granted him a second chance at a fated bond. Their union was political, a sterile alliance that did nothing to soothe the raw, festering wound left by his rejection of Ilara. He was a powerful king, but he was incomplete. The land felt it. His people felt it, and he, in the lonely, echoing chambers of his palace, felt it most of all. His wolf was a restless, snarling beast, perpetually pacing the cage of his ribs, tormented by the ghost of a scent it could never forget, jasmine and rain. He drove his warriors harder, demanded more from his advisors, and ruled with an iron fist, trying to fight the encroaching darkness with brute force. But it was a spiritual malady, and it could not be met with swords. One night, the eldest seer, Lyra, a she-wolf whose eyes held the wisdom of centuries, came before him. "The blight is a poison of the soul, my king," she rasped, her voice thin as dry leaves. "The heart of the kingdom is broken because the heart of its king is broken. The bond you severed was not merely a bond between two wolves. It was a sacred covenant with the land itself. The Luna you cast away, she was not what you thought she was." Kale's jaw tightened, his silver eyes flashing with irritation. "She was an Omega, weak." "She was a shield," Lyra corrected, her voice gaining a surprising strength. "She carried the blood of the first Luna, a lineage we thought lost to time. Her wolf was a silver wolf, a healer of the land, whose power remains dormant, hidden behind a veil of humility. You did not see her strength because you were blinded by pride. Without her, the kingdom will wither and die, and so will you." The seer's words hit him with the force of a physical blow. A silver wolf, a healer. He had not just rejected a mate, he had rejected the salvation of his people. The memory of her face, tear-streaked and shattered, rose in his mind, sharp and accusing. The scent of her fear and pain was a ghost on his tongue. For 5 years he had told himself he had done what was necessary, that his kingdom needed a strong Alpha Luna. But Lyra's prophecy lanced the boil of his denial, and the truth flooded out, hot and agonizing. He had been a fool, a cruel, arrogant fool. "Find her," he commanded, his voice a raw growl that shook the very stones of the throne room. "Scour every corner of this continent. I don't care what it takes. Bring her back." The search was a monumental task. Ilara had vanished without a trace, her scent long since scattered to the winds. Kale's best trackers returned empty-handed. Their search parties met with dead ends and false trails. He grew more desperate, the gray blight now creeping into the capital city itself, the vibrant market square growing dull, the people's faces etched with a new deep-seated fear. Kale pushed himself to the brink, joining the search himself, his powerful senses stretched to their limit. He remembered her scent, the unique, intoxicating blend of jasmine and rain, and he chased that memory through crowded human cities and desolate wildernesses. It was a phantom, always just out of reach. Months turned into a year. The kingdom was on the verge of collapse. Selena, his consort, watched him with cold, possessive eyes. "You are wasting your time, Kale, chasing a ghost. The Omega is likely dead. We should consolidate our power, forget this foolish prophecy." Her words were practical, but they grated on his raw nerves. He could feel the truth of the seer's words in his very bones. Ilara was alive. He knew it. His soul ached for her. One evening, deep in a dusty archive, a scholar found a reference in an ancient text, a mention of a safe haven for displaced shifters, a human town called Havenwood, known for its ability to mask supernatural scents. It was a long shot, a needle in a continent-sized haystack. But it was hope. Kale didn't hesitate. He took his most trusted general, Lucian, and they left under the cover of darkness, 2 lone wolves on a desperate quest. They traveled for weeks, finally arriving in the unremarkable town of Havenwood. The air was thick with the smells of human life, a cacophony that assaulted Cale's senses. But underneath it all, faint, almost imperceptible, was a thread of a scent that made his heart stop. Jasmine. He followed it, his wolf surging to the forefront, every nerve ending alive with a desperate, painful hope. The scent led him to a small, unassuming diner, its neon sign flickering tiredly in the twilight. He pushed open the door, a small bell tinkling overhead. And then he saw her. She was thinner, her face etched with a weariness that hadn't been there before, but it was her. Her dark hair was tied back in a simple ponytail, and she wore a faded blue waitress uniform. She was pouring coffee for a heavy-set man at the counter, a faint, practiced smile on her lips. When she turned, her eyes, the color of warm chocolate, widened in shock and terror as they met his. The coffee pot slipped from her fingers, shattering on the linoleum floor, the dark liquid spreading like a pool of blood. Time stood still. For Cale, it was like the sun rising after an endless night. The fractured pieces of his soul screamed in recognition, yearning to be whole again. But for Ilara, it was her worst nightmare come to life. The monster from her past had found her. He took a step forward, his voice a raw whisper. Ilara. Her name on his lips was a violation. It broke the spell of her shock, replacing it with a surge of ice-cold fury. "Get out!" she hissed, her voice trembling but fierce. The few patrons in the diner turned to stare, their conversation dying away. Cale's eyes, those same silver eyes that had condemned her, were now filled with a desperate, pleading light that she refused to acknowledge. "Please," he said, taking another step, "let me explain." "There's nothing to explain," she shot back, grabbing a rag from behind the counter, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold it. "You made yourself perfectly clear 5 years ago. Now leave before I call the police." The word police was a pathetic, human threat, and they both knew it. Lucian, ever the loyal general, placed a hand on Cale's arm. "My king, perhaps this isn't the place." But Cale was deaf to him. He was locked on Ilara, his entire being focused on the mate he had thrown away. "I was wrong," he said, his voice raw with a sincerity that twisted the knife in her gut. "Arrogant, a fool. My kingdom, our kingdom, is dying. I need you." "Your kingdom," she corrected, her voice dripping with venom. "It was never mine. I was just a broodmare you deemed unworthy. You need me? That's rich. The great Alpha King needs a weak little Omega." "What's the matter? Did your pure-blooded consort fail to fix your problems?" The mention of Selena was a low blow, and it landed. A muscle feathered in Kyle's jaw. "This isn't about her. This is about us, about our bond." "We don't have a bond," she cried, the lie scorching her tongue. She could feel the ghost of it, a throbbing ache in her chest that had never truly faded. "You destroyed it." Just then, the diner door opened again, and a small boy with a mop of dark, curly hair and startling silver eyes ran in, a bright crayon-colored drawing clutched in his hand. "Mommy, look, I drew a wolf." Liam. Kyle's gaze fell upon the boy, and the world tilted on its axis. He saw his own eyes staring back at him from the child's face. He saw the proud set of his own jaw in the boy's determined chin. There was no doubt. This was his son. The air crackled with unspoken revelation. Kyle's breath hitched, a strangled sound of disbelief and dawning earth-shattering comprehension. He looked from Liam to Ilara, his expression a maelstrom of shock, pain, and a terrifying, possessive awe. Ilara's heart hammered against her ribs. The secret she had guarded with her life was laid bare in the middle of a greasy spoon diner. She moved instinctively, pulling Liam behind her, shielding him from Kyle piercing gaze. "He's mine," she snarled, her voice low and dangerous. A protective fire she hadn't felt in years surged through her veins, her dormant wolf stirring in its sleep. "You have no claim on him." Kyle seemed unable to speak. He simply stared at Liam, who peeked out from behind Ilara's legs, his silver eyes wide with curiosity. A son. He had a son. He had abandoned his pregnant mate, leaving her to raise their child alone in this desolate human world. The weight of his crime crashed down on him, heavier and more crushing than the impending doom of his kingdom. This was no longer just about a prophecy or a dying land. This was about a family he had forsaken. He has my eyes," Kyle finally managed to say, his voice thick with a profound, soul-deep regret. "No," Ilara said, her voice shaking with the force of her rage and fear. "He has my strength. He survived despite you. You will not touch him. You will not speak to him. You will leave this town and never come back." She scooped Liam into her arms, holding him tight against her chest. "Let's go, baby." She pushed past Kyle, refusing to meet his eyes, the scent of his regret and longing a suffocating cloud around her. As she brushed past him, her arm made contact with his, and a jolt of pure energy, hot and undeniable, shot through them both. A spark from their broken bond, still alive, still fighting to connect. The shock of it made her stumble. Kyle reached out to steady her, his touch burning like a brand on her skin. She flinched away as if she'd been burned. "Don't touch me," she whispered, her voice breaking. She fled from the diner, leaving Kyle standing amidst the shattered remains of the coffee pot, his world completely, irrevocably shattered with it. He had not just found his lost mate. He had found the son he never knew he had, and in the same moment he had seen the unbridgeable chasm of hatred and fear he had carved between them. Kyle did not leave. He couldn't. The sight of his son, the raw, visceral proof of his monstrous mistake, had anchored him to this place. He and Lucian took a room at the town's only motel, a run-down establishment with peeling paint and the lingering smell of stale cigarettes. From there, Kyle watched her. It wasn't the strategic observation of a king, but the desperate, painful vigil of a ghost haunting the edges of a life he had no right to enter. He saw her walk Liam to the little yellow school bus in the mornings, her hand protectively on his shoulder. He saw her laughing at something Liam said, a rare, genuine smile that lit up her face and made Kyle's chest ache with a terrible, hollow longing. He saw the exhaustion in her posture as she walked home from the diner late at night, her shoulders slumped under an invisible weight. The weight he had placed there. He tried to approach her again, away from the prying eyes of the diner. He found her in the small park where she took Liam to play after school. He kept his distance at first, just watching as his son climbed the jungle gym, his laughter echoing in the crisp autumn air. Every joyful shout was a dagger in Kyle's heart. Finally, he gathered his courage and walked towards her. She was sitting on a bench, a small, weary smile on her face as she watched their son. She sensed him before she saw him, her whole body stiffening, the smile vanishing as if it had never been. "What do you want?" she asked, without turning to look at him. Her voice was flat, exhausted. "I want to talk," he said, stopping a few feet away. "About him." He nodded towards Liam. "His name is Liam," she said, her tone sharp, "and there is nothing to talk about. He is my son. He is my son too, Ilara." The words felt foreign and momentous on his tongue. She finally turned to look at him, her brown eyes filled with a cold fire. "You forfeited that right when you threw his mother out like garbage. You think you can just show up after 5 years and claim him? You have no idea what it took to keep him safe, to feed him, to give him a life. I worked 3 jobs when he was a baby, cleaning toilets and scrubbing floors, all while my own body was screaming from the pain of your rejection. I did that, me, alone. So don't you dare come here and say his name like you have any right to it. Her words were a physical assault, each one landing like a blow. He didn't flinch. He deserved every ounce of her hatred. I know, he said, his voice quiet, stripped of all its usual authority. I can't change what I did, but I can try to atone for it. Let me help you. You don't have to live like this. Come back with me. You will be my queen, and Liam will be the prince. He will have everything he could ever want. He thought he was offering her the world, but all she heard was a transaction, a king trying to buy back what he had broken. She let out a bitter, humorless laugh. A queen? You want to put a crown on the head of the Omega you were ashamed of? You aren't offering me a throne, Kyle. You're offering me a prettier cage. And you're not doing it for me or for him. You're doing it because some prophecy told you that your kingdom is falling apart and I'm the key to fixing it. I am not your tool, and my son will not your pawn. She stood up, her small frame radiating a strength he had never seen before. Stay away from us. If you truly feel any regret for what you did, you'll grant me that one thing. Leave us alone. She called to Liam, her voice soft and loving again, a stark contrast to the venom she directed at Kyle. The boy ran to her, and she hugged him tightly, burying her face in his hair before leading him away, leaving Kyle standing alone in the park, the setting sun casting long, lonely shadows around him. His offer of a crown had been a clumsy, foolish attempt to fix an unfixable wound. He saw that now. He couldn't command her forgiveness. He would have to earn it, and he had no idea how. His chance came in the form of a threat he had inadvertently led to her doorstep. Selena, his ambitious consort, had grown suspicious of his long absence. Using the considerable resources of her Ironclaw pack, she had tracked him to Havenwood. She arrived not with an army, but with something far more insidious. 2 of her most ruthless enforcers, their mission clear. If the Omega was alive, she was a threat to Selena's position, a threat that needed to be eliminated. Kyle sensed their arrival first. The scent of strange, hostile wolves on the edge of town set his own wolf on high alert. He knew immediately who they were and why they were here. A cold, terrifying dread washed over him. He had put Alara and Liam in mortal danger. That evening, as Alara was walking home from work, the 2 enforcers cornered her in a dark alleyway. They were large, brutal-looking males, their lips curled back in predatory snarls. "The Alpha Queen sends her regards," one of them growled, his eyes glowing with malice. "She says a dead Omega can't challenge her claim." Alara's heart seized with terror. She was no fighter. Her wolf was suppressed, and even at its full strength, it was no match for 2 seasoned Ironclaw warriors. She backed away, her hands held up in a placating gesture. "I don't know what you're talking about. I want no part of your world." "Too late for that," the other sneered, lunging for her. But before he could reach her, a blur of motion exploded from the shadows. Kale. He moved with a speed and ferocity that was breathtaking, a king's rage made manifest. He didn't just fight them, he dismantled them. It was a brutal, efficient display of power, over in seconds. He left the 2 warriors broken and whimpering on the ground. When it was over, he turned to Alara, his chest heaving, his silver eyes blazing with a protective fury that was terrifying and, to her confusion, strangely comforting. He was covered in blood, some of it his own, but his only concern was for her. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice a low, urgent growl. She shook her head, too stunned to speak. He had just saved her life. "This is my fault," he said, his voice laced with self-loathing. "I led them to you. I put you and my son in danger. I will never forgive myself for that." He looked at her then, his eyes raw with vulnerability. "But I will not let anyone harm you. I swear it on my life." The sincerity in his voice was undeniable, but it was his next action that truly fractured her defenses. He didn't try to touch her or command her. He simply looked at the scar on her neck, the faint, silvery mark of their rejected bond, a place that often throbbed with a dull, phantom pain. "Does it still hurt?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. The question was so unexpected, so intimate, that it disarmed her. Tears sprang to her eyes, tears she had held back for years. "Always," she whispered, the single word encompassing a world of pain. A profound sadness washed over his face. He looked utterly broken. "I am so sorry, Alara, more than you will ever know." It was in that moment, seeing the king brought low not by a curse or a prophecy, but by the simple, devastating weight of his own regret, that a tiny crack appeared in the wall around her heart. But trust, once shattered, was not so easily pieced back together. She pulled her jacket tighter around herself. "Thank you for that," she said, gesturing to the groaning warriors. "But this changes nothing. In fact, it proves my point. Your world is violent and dangerous. It is no place for my son." "Our son," he corrected gently, but with an unyielding firmness. "And he is not safe here either, not anymore. They know where you are. Selena will not stop. She will send more. The only place I can guarantee his safety is by my side, in the heart of my kingdom." It was a horrifying, undeniable truth. Her quiet little life was over. Cale's world had found her, and it would not let her go. He was using her son to manipulate her, framing it as protection. Or was he? The genuine fear in his eyes when he looked at her, the self-hatred in his voice, it felt real. "What do you want from me, Cale?" she asked, her voice weary. "I want you to let me protect you," he said. "I want you to let me be a father to my son. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not asking you to be my queen. I'm just asking you to come home, where you will be safe. Let me earn back a fraction of the trust I destroyed." The plea in his voice was her undoing. He wasn't a king demanding obedience. He was a man begging for a chance to fix the biggest mistake of his life. She thought of Liam, of his bright, innocent smile, and she knew she would do anything to protect it, even if it meant returning to the place of her greatest humiliation, to the side of the man who had caused her deepest pain. "Fine," she said, the word tasting like ash in her mouth. "We will go with you, for Liam's safety. But that is all this is. Do you understand? You and I, we are nothing." Kael's expression was a mixture of profound relief and deep sorrow. He had his foot in the door, but he knew he was still a world away from her heart. "I understand," he said, and for the first time, she believed him. The return to the Silvermoon Kingdom was a tense, surreal experience. Kael had arranged for a private jet, a luxury so alien to Alara's life that it felt like stepping into another dimension. Liam, however, was enthralled, his face pressed against the window as the world shrank below them. He peppered Kael with questions, his innate curiosity overriding any shyness. To Alara's surprise, Kael was patient and gentle with him, answering every question with a solemn focus she'd only ever seen him apply to matters of state. He explained how the clouds were formed, pointed out the shape of the river systems below, and even managed a small rusty smile when Liam declared he wanted to fly the plane himself. Watching them, a complicated tangle of emotions twisted in Alara's gut. She saw the father her son had been denied, and the sight was both beautiful and agonizing. When they landed, they were met by a contingent of the royal guard. Their deference to her was immediate and absolute, a stark contrast to the pity and scorn she had received when she was cast out. Word of the king's quest had spread, and whispers of the prophecy followed them through the palace corridors. They saw her not as a disgraced Omega, but as a potential savior. She was escorted to a luxurious suite of rooms, a place of silk sheets and gilded furniture that felt more like a prison than a home. Her every need was catered to, but she felt trapped, a bird in a cage, her every move watched. Kael gave her space, but his presence was a constant weight in the air. He had dealt with Selena swiftly and decisively. Upon his return, he had publicly dissolved their political union and banished her and her enforcers from his lands, accusing them of treason for acting against the fated mate of the king. It was a clear, unequivocal message to the entire kingdom. Ilara was under his protection. But this public declaration only served to isolate Ilara further. The court was now a sea of false smiles and veiled glances. They were polite, but their curiosity was rapacious. They wanted to see the magic healer, the long-lost Luna. They looked at her and at Liam as if they were curiosities, the keys to a puzzle. Liam, oblivious to the political currents, was simply excited. He had never seen a place so grand, and the idea that his father was a king was a fairy tale come to life. He spent hours exploring the palace gardens with Lucian, who had become his unofficial guardian and friend. Kael tried to bridge the gap between them. He would bring Liam to her rooms in the evening, and the three of them would have dinner together. The meals were quiet, stilted affairs. Ilara spoke only when necessary, her answers short and clipped. Kael, for his part, focused on Liam, asking about his day, telling him stories of the kingdom's history, of brave warriors and magical creatures. One evening, after Liam had fallen asleep on the plush sofa, Kael finally addressed the suffocating silence between them. "He's a wonderful boy, Ilara. You've done an incredible job with him." Ilara simply nodded, her gaze fixed on her son's sleeping face. "He is everything to me." "I see that," Kael said softly. He hesitated, then continued, his voice low. "When I rejected you, I felt nothing. It was a political calculation. My father had drilled into me that the kingdom needed a strong Alpha Luna. That sentiment was a weakness we couldn't afford. I let his prejudice, my own pride, blind me. I turned off my heart, my wolf, everything. It was only after you were gone that the silence became deafening. The agony of the broken bond. I deserved it. But I never imagined, I never considered that you might be—" He trailed off, unable to say the word pregnant. "You never considered me at all," she finished for him, her voice devoid of emotion. "I was an inconvenience, a problem to be disposed of." "No," he said, his voice ragged. "A mistake, the greatest mistake of my life, and I have paid for it every single day for 5 years. And I have lived with it," she countered, her voice finally cracking. "I have lived with the shame, the fear, the loneliness. Do you have any idea what it feels like to have your fated mate look at you as if you are nothing? To feel your own soul tear in two? I carried your child, And every day I was terrified that someone would find out, that they would try to take him from me, that you would try to take him from me. The dam of her composure broke, and the tears she had held back for so long finally fell, hot and bitter. Kale took a step towards her, his hands clenched at his sides, his every instinct screaming to comfort her, to hold her, but he knew he had not earned that right. "I would never take him from you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Ilara, I swear to you, I will spend the rest of my life trying to make this right. I know you don't believe me now, but I will show you." His vulnerability was a powerful weapon. It chipped away at her anger, leaving behind the raw, aching grief that had been its foundation all along. But just as a sliver of warmth began to penetrate the ice around her heart, the real threat made itself known. The withering, the curse upon the land was not just a passive decay. It was an active, malevolent force, an ancient entity that had been awakened by the broken bond. And it had sensed Ilara's return. It saw her not as a healer, but as a threat to its dominion over the dying kingdom. That night, the blight breached the palace's magical wards. It came not as a creeping grayness, but as a physical manifestation, a creature of shadow and thorns, its form shifting and coalescing from the darkness in the corner of Ilara's room. It moved towards Liam's bed, its shadowy tendrils reaching for the sleeping boy, drawn to his royal blood. Ilara screamed, throwing herself in front of her son. The creature's touch was icy cold, leaching the life and warmth from her, its thorns tearing at her skin. Just as it was about to overwhelm her, the door to her suite burst open. Kale was there, his wolf fully unleashed. He was no longer a king in tailored clothes. He was a primal force of nature, his silver eyes glowing with incandescent rage. He tore into the shadow creature, his claws and teeth ripping at its ephemeral form. But it was like fighting smoke. For every piece he tore away, it reformed. It was a spiritual entity, and physical force was useless against it. The creature flung Kale across the room with a flick of a shadowy arm, sending him crashing into a stone wall. He slumped to the ground, stunned and bleeding from a deep gash on his head. The shadow thing turned its full attention back to Ilara and Liam. It was then that something inside Ilara snapped. The sight of her son in danger, of Kale, the powerful king, lying wounded and helpless in his attempt to protect them, ignited a fire within her. The dormant, sleeping part of her soul awakened with a roar. Her wolf, the silver wolf of legend, surged forward. An explosion of pure white light erupted from her, blasting the shadow creature back. It shrieked, a sound of tearing fabric and scraping stone as the light seared its form. Ilara was enveloped in the glow, her body rising a few inches off the floor. Her eyes, once a simple brown, now shone with a brilliant silvery luminescence. The air around her crackled with an ancient, forgotten power. She wasn't an Omega. She wasn't even an Alpha. She was something more. A Luna in the truest sense of the word. A conduit for the life force of the moon goddess herself. She extended a hand, and a beam of silver light shot out, striking the creature of shadow. It dissolved, not into smoke, but into dust, its malevolent energy purified and neutralized. The room fell silent. The only sound was Liam's frightened whimpering. The silver light around Ilara slowly faded, and she fell to her knees, exhausted but whole. Her wolf was finally free. Kyle pushed himself up, his head throbbing, his eyes wide with utter awe. He had seen her power. It was magnificent, terrifying, and beautiful. It was the power of a queen. Ilara rushed to Liam, pulling him into a fierce embrace, whispering soothing words. Once he had calmed, her attention turned to Kael. He was bleeding freely, the wound on his head deep and dangerous. Without thinking, she went to him. Her hand, still humming with residual power, hovered over his wound. "Let me," she whispered. He nodded, his gaze locked on hers, full of a reverence that stole her breath. She placed her palm against his temple. The same silver light flowed from her hand, warm and gentle. The skin knitted back together, the blood vanished, and in seconds the wound was gone, leaving behind only smooth, unblemished skin. As she healed him, their minds touched. It was not a full mind link, but a brush of emotions, a torrent of shared feelings. She felt his profound regret, his shame, his overwhelming love for her and their son. And he felt her years of pain, her loneliness, her fierce, unyielding love for Liam, and beneath it all, the faint, stubborn flicker of the love she had once felt for him. The touch completed their bond. The jagged, scarred edges of what he had broken were fused together not by fate, but by her choice, by her act of healing. A visible thread of silver energy shimmered in the air between them, connecting them, heart to heart, soul to soul. He reached up and gently touched the mark on her neck. Under his fingers, the painful scar bloomed into a beautiful, intricate silver pattern, the true Luna's mark. It no longer ached. It hummed with a quiet, steady power. "Ilara," he breathed, his voice filled with a wonder that mirrored her own. She looked at him, at the man who had been her tormentor and was now her mate, truly and completely. And she knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that nothing would ever be the same. He didn't try to kiss her or claim her in any physical way. He simply knelt before her, the mighty Alpha King, and bowed his head. "My Luna," he said, his voice thick with an emotion that was deeper than gratitude. It was devotion. "My queen, forgive me." In that moment of surrender, of utter submission to her power and her grace, he finally won her back. "There is nothing to forgive," she said, her voice soft but strong, as she helped him to his feet. "There is only what we do now, together." The kingdom healed. With Ilara's power flowing through the newly forged bond, the land began to recover. The gray blight receded from the forests and fields, replaced by vibrant green. The rivers ran clear and sparkling again, and the sickness that had plagued the people vanished. Ilara was not just a healer, she was a leader. She walked among the people, her gentle strength and innate compassion a soothing balm to their frayed nerves. They adored her. She and Kael worked side by side, a true partnership. He had the strength and strategic mind of a king, but she had the wisdom and heart of a Luna. She tempered his harshness, and he gave her the confidence to wield her incredible power. Their bond was a source of constant wonder. They could feel each other's emotions, share thoughts with a glance, and draw strength from one another across any distance. The love that had been so cruelly denied to them now bloomed, fierce and passionate, a wildfire that consumed all the pain of the past. They were more than mates. They were two halves of a single soul, finally made whole. Kael presented Ilara to the court not as his reclaimed mate, but as the savior of their kingdom. He recounted the tale of her hidden power, of her bravery in the face of the shadow creature, and of her grace in healing both him and the land. He publicly begged her forgiveness for his blindness and cruelty, his confession echoing through the great hall where he had once rejected her. This time, there were no whispers of scorn, only gasps of awe and murmurs of reverence. When he placed the Luna's crown upon her head, the entire court, from the highest Alpha to the humblest Omega, knelt in unison. Liam stood beside them, a small, proud prince, holding both of their hands. He was no longer a secret to be hidden, but the heir to a stronger, more united kingdom. Their life found a new rhythm, a balance of duty and family. They would spend their days ruling, making decisions that brought prosperity and peace to their people. But their evenings were their own. They would have dinner as a family, the three of them, their laughter echoing in the once lonely dining hall. They would put Liam to bed together, tucking him in with stories of ancient magic and brave silver wolves. One night, after Liam was asleep, Alara and Kael stood on the balcony of their chambers, the same balcony from which he had once looked out with a cold, empty heart. The twin moons shone brightly, bathing the rejuvenated kingdom in their ethereal light. Kael wrapped his arms around her from behind, pulling her close against his chest. He rested his chin on her shoulder, his lips brushing against the now beautiful mate mark on her neck. "I still can't believe you're real," he murmured, his voice a low, contented rumble. "That after everything I did, you are here with me." Ilara leaned back against him, covering his hands with her own. "I'm here," she said softly. "We're here. We found our way back." He turned her in his arms, his silver eyes, once so cold, now filled with a warmth and love that was a universe unto itself. He didn't need to say the words. She could feel them pouring from him through their bond, a constant, beautiful song of adoration and devotion. He was hers, and she was his, forever. He lowered his head and kissed her, a slow, deep kiss filled with the promise of 1,000 tomorrows. The silver thread of their bond shimmered between them, a visible manifestation of their unbreakable love, glowing brightly under the watchful eyes of the moon goddess who had, in her infinite wisdom, brought them back home.